I stepped into my wife's law firm launch party expecting cheers, clinking glasses, and warm congratulations. What I found instead was a wall of mocking laughter, accusatory stares, and a divorce packet thrust at me like a restaurant check. Every person there referred to me as the trial husband. Victoria proudly announced that I was now her firm's first client. "Sign the papers and go," she declared. And that's exactly what I did. I signed, offered a calm smile, and walked out without a word. What she didn't realize was that I had been quietly backing her ambitions with $20 million of my own fortune. And in less than a minute, I was about to withdraw every single dollar from beneath her. The first warning came even before I reached my car, 456 missed calls flashing across my phone. Then someone appeared at my door, and what she had painstakingly built began to crumble in ways she could never have anticipated. My name is Trevor Ashford. I'm 46, and for the last 22 years, I've been at the helm of Ashford Capital Management, a private equity firm I built from nothing. I started with $50,000 borrowed from my late father and turned it into a portfolio exceeding $200 million. I'm not sharing this to boast, it's to give context. Knowing where I came from makes what happened next even more staggering. Before I dive into how I unraveled everything Victoria had built, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment sharing what you'd do in my position, and smash that like button if this story hits home. You're about to witness how one quiet exit can destroy an empire. I met Victoria Cambridge 14 years ago at a charity gala. She was 28, fresh out of law school, and working as an associate at Morrison & Blake, one of Chicago's top corporate law firms. She had a natural presence, smart, witty, and so confident that even senior partners felt a twinge of unease around her. When she laughed at my joke about lawyers being professional debaters, I knew I was in trouble. Our wedding was the picture of her dreams. The Drake Hotel ballroom, 300 guests, and coverage in a high-end Chicago magazine. She wore a custom Vera Wang gown worth more than many people's cars, and I didn't bat an eye at the cost because her happiness was priceless. Our honeymoon was a 3-week escape along the Amalfi Coast, filled with wine, sun, and plans for our life together. Victoria's goal was clear: make partner at Morrison & Blake within 5 years, then eventually launch her own firm specializing in corporate litigation and mergers. I promised to support her in any way she needed. For 13 years, I kept that promise. Victoria worked relentlessly, often 80-hour weeks during trial preparation. Weekends vanished into case files and depositions. I never complained. Ambition was something I understood. I had built my own firm from scratch with the same relentless focus. But around year 10, things began to shift in ways I couldn't ignore. Late nights grew longer. Business trips multiplied. Victoria began taking calls in private rooms, closing doors that were once left open. She developed the habit of keeping her phone face down, locking it with biometrics she changed monthly. When I questioned her, she waved it off with explanations about client confidentiality and attorney-client privilege, answers that sounded reasonable but felt wrong. Then came the lifestyle changes. She joined a new, exclusive gym with odd training hours and started purchasing lingerie I never saw her wear, luxury items from boutiques she never mentioned. Her perfume changed from a light, floral scent to a heavy, exotic fragrance that clung to clothing, hinting at hidden excursions. The most alarming shift, though, was in her career ambitions. For years, she had spoken of partnership at Morrison & Blake as her ultimate goal. Then, about 8 months ago, she began hinting at starting her own firm, sooner than expected. Within months, she claimed, investors were already lined up. The office space in the financial district had already been secured. Everything was accelerating, too rapidly for a plan she claimed had just begun. I stayed silent, partly out of curiosity to see how long she could maintain the facade, and partly because I was already mapping out contingencies. I hadn't built a thriving investment firm by ignoring red flags or hoping issues would vanish on their own. When you notice smoke, you start searching for the fire. And when you locate the fire, you make sure you're not standing in the blast zone when it erupts. The invitation arrived 3 weeks before the event. Thick cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of formal announcement that screams, "We've arrived." The words read, "Cambridge & Associates Grand Opening Celebration." Victoria handed it to me over breakfast, her smile bright and expectant. "Trevor, this is it," she said, eyes gleaming. "Everything we've worked for, be there when I cut the ribbon on my own firm." "Our firm," I corrected softly. "We built this together." Her smile flickered for a moment. Of course, it was our firm, but the way she said it left no doubt whose name would grace the door and whose contributions she actually valued. The morning of the launch, Victoria left early to oversee final preparations. She wore a navy Armani suit, probably worth $4,000, and her hair was pulled into the severe bun she reserved for high-stakes occasions. She looked every bit the accomplished attorney about to open her practice. What she did not look like was someone thankful to the man who had made it all possible. Here's what Victoria didn't realize I had discovered. About 6 months ago, she approached me with her business plan for Cambridge & Associates, requesting capital to start the firm. I did my homework, not just reviewing her strategy, which was solid, and her projected clients, which were impressive, but also scrutinizing her motives. What I uncovered was revealing. Victoria had been involved in an 18-month affair with Nathan Cross, a managing partner at Morrison & Blake. Nathan, 52, married with 3 children, seemed drawn to ambitious young associates who reminded him of his prime years. The affair began during a merger case, with long hours in conference rooms eventually leading to hotel rooms in cities where anonymity allowed them freedom. I knew about Nathan because I pay people to know things. Detective Raymond Pierce, formerly of the Chicago PD and now head of a private investigation firm specializing in corporate intelligence and personal matters when necessary, had provided every detail: hotel receipts, photographs, recovered text messages, and even audio recordings from a device Victoria had inadvertently left running in her briefcase during a particularly indiscreet lunch meeting. The most shocking part: Nathan Cross was also one of Victoria's primary investors in Cambridge & Associates. He had contributed $8 million from a trust fund his wife was unaware of. Victoria had secured another $5 million from various investors, including $3 million from her parents, who mortgaged their retirement home to support her dream. And then there was my contribution, $20 million. $20 million I had funneled into Cambridge & Associates over 6 months, structured as a combination of investments and loans that made me the firm's majority stakeholder. Victoria had paperwork acknowledging my investment, but she didn't have the complete documentation showing that I could retract every dollar within 24 hours under specific conditions. Conditions I had tucked into the fine print, overlooked in her excitement while signing. And those conditions were straightforward. The investment depended entirely on 2 things: our marriage staying intact and Victoria avoiding any actions that could be considered a violation of her duties to the firm's main stakeholder, me. By the legal definition my lawyers had carefully drafted, adultery counted as a clear breach. Victoria thought she was cunning, securing my funding while scheming her escape with Nathan. What she didn't realize was that I had been anticipating her moves for months, constructing a trap so precise she wouldn't recognize it until it had already closed around her. The celebration was held at the Four Seasons, naturally. Victoria had booked their largest ballroom for the evening, the same room where we had marked our 5th wedding anniversary. The irony was not lost on me. I arrived at precisely 7:02 p.m., clad in the Tom Ford suit Victoria had purchased for occasions like this. If I was going to witness the end of my marriage, I intended to do it looking impeccable. The instant I stepped through the ballroom doors, something felt wrong. The atmosphere shifted as though someone had changed the channel. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. Guests turned toward me, their expressions ranging from pity to amusement to outright derision. Near the bar, someone muttered just loud enough for me to catch, "The trial husband has arrived." A ripple of laughter spread through the room, small at first, then growing louder as people realized I had heard. Trial husband. As if I were a rehearsal model Victoria had used before moving on to the real version. I paused in the doorway, taking it all in. Colleagues from Morrison & Blake were scattered throughout the room, clad in expensive suits and carefully curated smiles, all seemingly in on the joke at my expense. Victoria's parents hovered near the champagne fountain, uneasy but unsurprised. And there, at the front on the small stage where Victoria was supposed to give her opening remarks, stood Nathan Cross beside her, posture radiating ownership and certainty. Victoria spotted me then. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and for a fleeting moment, I glimpsed something in her expression: guilt, regret, or perhaps just irritation that I had shown up. Almost immediately, she masked it with professional detachment, murmuring something to Nathan, who nodded with a smug grin. "Trevor, so glad you could make it," she announced, her voice cutting through the now quiet ballroom. She stepped down from the stage, Nathan close behind, obedient as a shadow. "Can we speak somewhere private?" she asked. I followed them to a small conference room off to the side. The door clicked shut behind us, echoing like a cell locking. Victoria retrieved an envelope from her jacket pocket, crisp and obviously prepared ahead of time. "Trevor," she began, her tone precise and formal, the same one she used when delivering bad news to clients. "I think we both understand that this marriage hasn't been working for a long while." Nathan lingered near the window, not even attempting to hide his presence. His gaze held a mixture of pity and condescension, as if observing the hapless fool who had failed to see this coming. "Interesting choice of location for divorce papers," I remarked, keeping my tone even. "Your firm's grand opening." Victoria's composure faltered slightly. She looked just a touch unsettled. "I thought it would be efficient," she said. "The first official case for Cambridge and Associates, our divorce. It demonstrates the firm's dedication to managing challenging situations with professionalism." "How considerate," I replied dryly. "Turning the collapse of our marriage into a marketing strategy." "Don't exaggerate," she said, flipping open the envelope and pulling out a stack of documents. "These are standard dissolution forms, community property division, no-fault divorce. Simple and straightforward," she said. "I've already signed. Once you add your signature, we can both move on." I accepted the documents and skimmed through them. Just as she claimed, it was a clean separation on paper. Assets divided evenly. She retained ownership of Cambridge and Associates. I kept Ashford Capital Management. Everything else was split down the center. But Victoria had made a fatal miscalculation. She valued Cambridge and Associates at $15 million, factoring in the capital she knew about, Nathan's contribution, her parents' money, and funds from smaller investors. What she failed to correctly classify was my $20 million infusion. On the documents, it appeared as a shared marital asset, subject to division. In reality, it was a conditional loan, fully retractable, bound by performance clauses she had just violated. "This looks uncomplicated," I said, producing a pen from my jacket. "You're confident this is what you want?" Victoria gave a decisive nod. "It's what we both need. You know that." That was when Nathan stepped closer, resting his hand on her shoulder in a display of solidarity that made my jaw tighten. "For what it's worth, Trevor," he said, "no animosity. These situations happen. Victoria and I never intended for things to unfold like this." I studied him, the man who helped wreck my marriage while secretly siphoning money from his own family to bankroll my wife's ambitions. "Of course you didn't intend it," I replied calmly. "Intent requires considering outcomes, and neither of you seems especially concerned with that." I signed every page without hesitation. Fast, deliberate strokes. Victoria's eyes flickered with surprise. She'd likely anticipated resistance, arguments, anger, maybe desperation. Instead, I handed the papers back with a polite smile. "That's finished," I said. "Anything else you need from me?" She slipped the documents back into the envelope, relief unmistakable. "No. That's everything. You're welcome to stay for the event, but I understand if you'd rather leave." "I'll skip the celebration," I said, turning toward the door. "But congratulations on the firm, Victoria. I hope it becomes exactly what you imagined." I exited the conference room with my posture straight and my phone already unlocked. Behind me, their voices dropped into quiet, relieved murmurs. They believed they'd won. They believed I'd surrendered without resistance. What they didn't know was that the real conflict had already begun, and it would conclude before they even realized the outcome. The ride back to my penthouse took 15 minutes through Chicago traffic. In those 15 minutes, I made 3 calls that would erase everything Victoria had built. The first was to my attorney, David Sherman. We'd been friends since Northwestern, and he specialized in precisely the kind of scorched-earth maneuver I was about to authorize. "David," I said when he answered, "activate Protocol 7. Every account. Every investment. Execute everything we discussed." There was a brief pause. Then the sound of rapid typing. "That's extreme, Trevor," he said. "You're absolutely sure?" She served me divorce papers at her firm's opening party, standing beside Nathan Cross, in front of half of Morrison and Blake's partners. "I understand," David replied. Give me 2 hours. By 10 p.m., everything will be in motion. The second call went to Raymond Pierce. Ray, I said, release all documentation. No filters. Nathan Cross's wife receives the complete file, hand-delivered. Morrison and Blake's Ethics Committee gets their copies tomorrow morning. Make sure the Illinois State Bar Association has theirs before close of business. Already staged, Ray replied. The courier is en route to Mrs. Cross's residence now. The remaining deliveries will proceed as scheduled. The third call was the one that would cut deepest. I dialed Charles Brennan, the managing partner of Morrison and Blake, and Nathan Cross's direct superior. Charles, it's Trevor Ashford. I need to discuss Nathan Cross and some serious concerns about his conduct that could put your firm at risk. For the next 10 minutes, I laid out everything I knew. Nathan's affair with Victoria. His misuse of trust funds to bankroll her firm. The numerous conflicts of interest created by their clandestine relationship. I explained that I had all the evidence ready and was prepared to present it to the proper authorities if Morrison and Blake failed to take immediate action. Charles Brennan was many things, but foolish wasn't one of them. He thanked me for bringing it to his attention and assured me that the firm would initiate a thorough internal review without delay. Translation: Nathan Cross's career was finished, and Morrison and Blake would dispose of him so fast he wouldn't even see it coming. By the time I reached my penthouse, the first dominoes were already toppling. I poured 3 fingers of Macallan 25 and sank into my leather chair, the city lights glittering below. My phone buzzed incessantly, but I ignored it. Let them scramble. Let them panic. Every detail of this moment had been planned for months, and I was going to savor it. The first real sign that Victoria grasped the scale of her mistake came at 9:47 p.m. My phone lit up with 127 missed calls and more than twice that many texts. Most were from her, escalating from confusion to anger to sheer desperation. The messages told the story in real time. 9:03 p.m. Trevor, there's an issue with the firm's accounts. Call me. 9:15 p.m. Trevor, this isn't a joke. Where is the money? 9:28 p.m. Trevor, $20 million is gone from the business account. What did you do? 9:35 p.m. Please answer. We need to talk. This must be a mistake. 9:42 p.m. Trevor, the investors are here. They're asking questions I can't answer. I sipped my scotch slowly, enjoying the precision of the unfolding chaos. Denial, then rage, then frantic pleading. Classic textbook progression. But I wasn't concerned with her emotions anymore. She had made her choices, and now she was confronting the consequences. Calls kept coming: Victoria, Nathan, Victoria again, her mother, Nathan again, and an unknown number I assumed was someone from Cambridge and Associates. At 10:07 p.m., there was a sharp knock on my door. Urgent. Demanding. I checked the security feed. Victoria was standing in the hallway. Her navy Armani suit was still immaculate, but her composure had crumbled. Hair had escaped the strict bun, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, phone clutched tightly like a weapon. I poured another sip of scotch and walked slowly to the door. "Victoria," I said smoothly. "What a surprise." She barged past me, spinning in the living room with eyes wide and frantic. "What did you do?" "The money, Trevor." "Where is it?" I closed the door, leaning against it with arms crossed. "What money are you talking about?" I asked, calm. "Don't play games with me," she hissed. $20 million vanished from the Cambridge and Associates account. The bank confirmed a wire transfer authorized by the primary stakeholder. "That's you, Trevor. You pulled all the funds." I walked to the bar to refill my glass, deliberately slow. "Did I?" "That seems like something I'd remember," I said, savoring each word. "Trevor, please," her voice wavered. "This isn't just about us. There are other investors. People who trusted me. My parents mortgaged their home for this. Nathan put in $8 million. The office lease, the equipment, staff salaries, they all depend on that capital you promised." I turned to face her fully, and for the first time that night, let my true emotions surface. "Capital. Promised. Let's be absolutely clear, Victoria. I never promised you anything," I said firmly. "I made an investment tied to specific conditions. You failed to meet them. As a result, the investment is being withdrawn. It's entirely legal and explicitly spelled out in the agreements you signed." "What conditions?" Victoria demanded, panic rising in her voice. "There were always conditions," I replied evenly, "even if you didn't read them. Turn to page 47, subsection 12. I let her absorb the words. The investment remains valid only if the primary stakeholders' interests are protected, free from conflicts, ethical violations, or breaches of trust that could endanger the firm's integrity. Your affair with Nathan Cross, who also happens to be an investor, is a glaring conflict. Using my capital while secretly planning to divorce me is a violation of trust. The contract is null, and my investment is recalled." Victoria's face drained of color. "You knew, all this time, about Nathan?" "I've known for 18 months, I said quietly. "Since the first hotel room in Minneapolis during the Carmichael merger. Every dinner, every weekend trip, every lie while plotting your exit, I know it all. I just waited until you had built something worth dismantling before I acted." She slumped onto my couch, legs trembling under her. "But my parents' money. Nathan's investment. You're ruining innocent lives." I let out a cold, deliberate laugh. "Innocent? Nathan Cross? The man who stole from his father's trust fund to impress you? The man whose wife is serving him divorce papers after 25 years of marriage? The man whose legal career will collapse when the Illinois State Bar Association reviews the evidence tomorrow? That Nathan Cross." Victoria looked up at me, horror in her eyes. "You sent all this to the Bar Association?" "I sent it to everyone who needed to know," I said. "Morrison and Blake's Ethics Board. The State Bar. Nathan's wife, who has already frozen all marital assets, including the $8 million he invested in your firm. And the trust administrators have been notified of his misuse of fiduciary funds. Nathan is facing potential criminal charges. But sure, let's talk about innocent people." "This is insane," Victoria whispered. "You're destroying everything because I fell out of love with you?" I crouched to meet her eyes, steady and unflinching. "No, Victoria. This isn't about love. This is about consequences. You didn't simply fall out of love. You orchestrated a long-planned betrayal, used my money to fund your escape, humiliated me in front of your colleagues, and thought you could walk away unscathed. This is about respect, integrity, and the principle that you cannot exploit someone and discard them without accountability." My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Charles Brennan from Morrison and Blake. I put him on speaker. "Trevor," Charles said, his voice tight with restrained anger, "Nathan Cross has been terminated immediately. We've also reviewed the Cambridge and Associates situation. I need to inform you that Morrison and Blake are withdrawing our partnership commitment. Given the ethical breaches, we cannot be associated with this firm." "I understand completely, Charles," I replied, watching Victoria's expression collapse as she absorbed the news. "Thank you for handling this so professionally." After hanging up, Victoria sat in stunned silence. "You've destroyed everything," she whispered. "The firm, Nathan's career, my reputation, all of it gone." I leaned back slightly, calm and precise. "No," I corrected gently. "You destroyed everything the moment you decided betrayal was a viable business strategy. I simply made sure you couldn't profit from it." "What am I supposed to do now?" Victoria's voice trembled as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I have employees depending on me, creditors expecting payment, a lease I can't cover without your money." I stood and walked toward the window, gazing over the Chicago skyline. "Victoria, you're brilliant, one of the smartest people I've ever known. Solve it the way I did when I started with nothing. Build something real, something earned, something that doesn't rely on lies, cheating, or taking advantage of those who care about you. Trevor, please, just give me something. Anything. My parents could lose their home if this fails." I turned to face her. "Your parents can speak with my attorney. I'll set up a repayment plan to safeguard their investment, because they're innocent in all this. They believed in you, supported your dream, and don't deserve to suffer for your choices. But you get nothing. Except the lesson you should have learned a long time ago. Character matters more than ambition, and integrity isn't optional." Victoria left my penthouse at 11:23 p.m., her designer suit wrinkled, makeup smudged, her life in ruins. I watched from the window as she climbed into her car, probably heading back to explain to her investors and staff how everything had collapsed in a single night. The next morning, my phone was still blowing up. Nathan Cross's lawyer trying to negotiate. Victoria's parents crying and thanking me for the repayment plan. Cambridge and Associates investors desperately trying to understand how their capital had vanished overnight. I ignored most of it, but took one call from Sebastian, my son from my first marriage. "Dad," he said, voice heavy with concern. "Mom told me about Victoria. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I told him honestly. "I'm free. And yes, I really did pull 20 million in a single night." "Every penny?" he asked. "Every single penny. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." There was a pause. "You know, Dad, most people would call what you did cruel or vindictive, but from where I'm standing, it looks like justice." He was right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences, showing that people who think they can use and discard others without repercussions will eventually learn the hard way. Victoria had spent months planning her escape, exploiting my generosity to fuel her ambitions while setting me up for public humiliation. She had gambled that I was too weak, too sentimental to fight back. She had gambled wrong. 6 months later, I ran into Victoria at a legal conference. She was an associate at a mid-sized firm, slowly rebuilding after Cambridge and Associates collapsed. Nathan Cross had been disbarred and was facing criminal charges. His wife had taken everything in the divorce: house, cars, college funds. Victoria looked thinner, older, worn down by the past 6 months. When she saw me, she didn't approach or speak. She simply gave a small nod, an acknowledgement of the shared history and mutual destruction. I nodded back and walked on. Nothing more needed saying. She had learned her lesson. I had moved on, and the world had realigned itself the way it always does when someone refuses to be treated as disposable. That's the thing about being underestimated. People assume quiet means weakness. They believe patience equals passivity. They think silence signals ignorance. But sometimes the person who says the least is simply 3 steps ahead, planning moves that no one sees coming until it's too late. Victoria called me her test-run husband that night. In a way, she was right. I was the experiment in what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness, generosity for naivety. She tested me, and she failed. And in failing, she lost everything she had worked so hard to build. If you found this story compelling, hit that like button and leave a comment. Tell me if I went too far or if Victoria got exactly what she deserved. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who refuse to be treated as disposable. Because everyone has a breaking point, and sometimes the quietest revenge is the one nobody sees coming until it has already undone everything built on lies. Remember, underestimating someone isn't just a mistake. It's a warning, and sometimes, the person you underestimate is exactly the one you should fear the most.